Hello and welcome back to OCD Coded. My name's Erin Brown. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and mental health counselor. I have OCD myself, and my hope with this is to help you learn to use your OCD as a superpower and learn that it's not something wrong with you. It's something that is a beautiful gift and that we can learn to harness in a powerful way. So today we will be talking about addiction and OCD, and there is quite a bit of overlap, and it can be a very sensitive topic or a very it can be hard to talk about. There's so much stigma around addiction and so much of that, and that where some people look at that as, you know, a like that, oh, it's will, you should just be able to figure it out. You should just be able to stop. Like, why can't you just do that? And looking at it as a personal moral failing that someone can't do that. And when looking at it through the lens of OCD, it becomes a lot easier to see how, that how the two are similar, and then how to approach it in this different way that can actually help instead of cause more disconnection and more, issues with the whole cycle. And so, I mean, like thinking about it with OCD, it's the obsession. What is the obsession? It doesn't matter what the obsession is, that there is an obsession that happens, and it's usually related to a fear. And addiction is usually talked about as a fear-based disease, that there's a fear something bad's going to happen if I don't do something right now. And then the compulsion is anything the person does to try to reduce that fear of the unknown. And how we can look at this with addiction in this way of it is not a personal moral failing. And that is what's so hard with OCD too, is OCD feels so responsible and so over responsible for everything, and feels, and there's a perfectionism kind of sense. And that's part of what leads that cycle to be so difficult, is because, the person, we have to accept that we're human is such a big piece of this, is that we are not going to be perfect, that there are going to be a million times we turn down the thing or say no to a thing or don't give in to a fear. And then that one time we give in to the fear, then it feels like that undoes all the times that we did say no to the fear, we didn't use the compulsion. And we're trying to really start to look at how we can see this cycle differently, that because then we give into the fear and then that shame cycle starts. And that's what's such a big piece of OCD and addiction, is the shame cycle, and how the obsession is happening, the fear is going on. It's like an intrusive thought that keeps coming, like, oh my gosh, this and this and this, like, which, and typically when we're trying to get to the below, like the deeper fear beneath it, it's not just the fear of something in this moment. It's this fear that I'm going to be abandoned. It's a fear I'm going to be alone. It's a fear I'm unlovable. And those are really scary fears. And OCD tries as much as it can to get a known from these. How can I know I am lovable? How can I know, that I am not alone? And all of these different fears that come up. And that is the cycle that becomes so difficult with it, because we might not get to know that in this moment, but how do we have that centeredness in ourselves, that, and be able to believe that without having to prove it and rationalize it? And that's what becomes so difficult also, is OCD is really a way that your mind is trying to solve a problem that the mind can't solve. And the more I can recognize that, and the more I can look at that there are many parts of myself, that my mind is just one part, and that the mind's job is not to keep us happy, as they say that in the trauma research conference a lot, that Bessel van der Kolk, the man who wrote The Body Keeps the Score, which I highly recommend. It can be a difficult book to go through, but that it has so much good information. It's difficult because they talk about trauma and describe it, and then describe how people healed from trauma. But, so reading some of those can be difficult. But so the Trauma Research Foundation is a way of like helping to show trauma research, which is so difficult. We don't, like, that's its whole own thing. But the point of it being that one thing that they remind a lot is that the brain's job is not to keep us happy. Our brain's job is to keep us alive. And if I can look at it from that perspective and look at it from what OCD is trying to do also, and with addiction, it's like that it's the brain really thinks it's helping. The brain really thinks that it's helping keep us alive. And it's based on all of these different things and these subconscious, messages that we have and that we're still acting out of. And so the way to move through that is to be able to recognize, okay, my brain's not trying to make me happy. My brain's trying to make me alive. That my brain is still a part of my body, that there is, and then how can I use other parts of my body to also process this instead of just thinking about it? That thinking about it, especially if the trauma happened when we were young and before the brain is fully developed in any sort of way, or that before the prefrontal cortex comes online and kind of gives us that ability for abstract thought, then it really is. We can't think our way through trauma. We can't think our way through addiction. And I think that that's a really powerful thing. And it's the same with OCD. We can't think our way through OCD. We think that thinking more is going to help, and it does not. And so it's really, how do we practice doing this and processing this in different ways than just our body, which a lot of, even with therapy, can be a lot of talk therapy. And that's why I think EMDR and some of the other modalities can be so helpful and important, especially if you've tried talk therapy and feel like you still need a little more. It's because we need to get more into the body, into the EMDR, the somatic kind of things, and being able to, and all without touch, it doesn't mean, but like that we need to be able to embody our own bodies. And that be able to do that in that way and help lead clients to that. And that's one thing that I try to do, and that I see that a lot of people struggle with, and then especially with addiction, and that the stigma behind it, and then with OCD too, there's a big stigma with OCD. And so I don't want to say, like, it's not that all addiction is OCD, but there is a like considerable overlap. And, I think that that could be researched more in that way of how can we look at this in these different ways. Like if we approach addiction as we approach OCD, I think we would get such more benefit from those kind of processes. And so the point of it would be to, how do we practice embodying ourselves and the present moment more? And again, OCD and trauma and addiction make all of that really difficult. We're scared to be in the present moment. We're afraid of all those things. We're afraid we're missing something we're supposed to be doing. We're afraid that, something I said hurt somebody and that I can't ever make it up to them again. And it becomes all of these fears and how we approach it. And that with addiction and with OCD, the whole point is to be able to notice and to pause. And that's where it kind of comes back to, it doesn't matter what the root of it is, we treat it the same. And when we start to look at that differently and start to see that if we look at our like issues through the lens of fear and through the lens of how we want to approach that fear differently, then it helps to just loosen that grip on everything of how strongly things feel, how immovable they feel, where it's just, where we just feel stuck in those patterns that it feels like it's impossible to get out of, that no matter how hard we try, we can't. And that's how we loosen that grip on it, is to try to come back to the present moment, that is, all that is real in some ways. And I have to be careful with saying that with OCD, because there's a big part of OCD that worries about the, is this real? Is it not kind of thing? And that is why OCD becomes so difficult to deal with. But that also, I think in some ways, it's a strength. And that the whole point of it is, we do have this ability to see these patterns. We do have this ability to take responsibility for ourselves. We do have an ability to see how our thoughts can manifest things. And that's why we take over so much over responsibility and try to do it in this different way. And it's part of how it gets us really super stuck, is because of that standard that OCD tries to hold itself to, and then feels very like broken if we can't do that thing. And we're trying to move or ease into, okay, that we are human, and that while we do want to continue to work on ourselves, that work is never done. But that's why I use the word practice a lot. I try to really say, I'm going to just practice this, that it is not a thing that I can work really hard right now and then be done with. It'll be a thing that I just have to keep practicing, and that really coming into the day, like to just today, that there's not yesterday, there's not tomorrow yet. We are in today. What can I do today in this moment? And the more I learned about, the steps in AA and the different things, I realized that they are for everybody, that like we all are addicted to certain things. We all are addicted to our comforts, the way we see the world. We're addicted to our beliefs. We're addicted to our fears. We're addicted to our worries. We're addicted to connection, or disconnection, or that like addiction can be about anything, that it touches all of our lives, and that those steps really do help us to learn, like to get out of our heads and into the present moment. And there's, there can be stigma with all that stuff too. It's not for everybody, and it's not, but that like the whole point of it is that it's a pathway. It's a pathway that you can try and see. And there's this book called Breathing Underwater by Richard Rohr. Rohr is in Rohr, I believe. And so that and really going through these ways of of how addiction can be looked at in this different way, and how like the whole point is that some of what of the addiction is about, that this is the way I think the world should be, and that's the one of the bases of addiction is I think the world should be this way, I think I should be this way, and then when it doesn't, when reality doesn't line up to that, I have a really hard time adjusting to it. And if we can look at it through that way, it helps to open up this whole other place of like, how can I start to accept and grieve that the world may never look exactly how it is in my head, and it may, and other people may perceive me differently than I perceive myself in my head, but that all of that is as it's intended to be, and that it's not about making the world match my head or making my head match the world. It's about loosening the grip on all of that, of being able to say and be able to grieve, that I think OCD is really a lot about grief in so many ways. And that, and with addiction too, it's the grief of things not turning out the way we thought, or us not turning out the way we thought, or us thinking we are broken or wrong. And so what if we started from the place of my needs and my feelings are valid? What if we started from the place of, I'm not broken, that this, that all of these things are a part of me. They are not who I am. They are part of me. They are not me, but that they are part, and that it's not a part we want to get rid of, but a part that we want to learn what it's trying to do and how to help it do that in a different way that actually does help us. And we will definitely continue talking about all of this and going into how we accept ourselves. And that's getting back into the shadow work that I've talked about in previous videos, that really does really encapsulate all the things we're trying to do. And so I'm going to be talking more about how that shadow work will help with all of this too, and how to see these things, that if we look at it from our fears and we address our fears differently, then all these things that used to seem unconnected now are more connected, and we can feel empowered to address them differently, and to really actually see change in our life that we feel good about in ourselves. And that is my goal for you. I hope you have a wonderful week. Until next time, see you then.